Okay, so I'm not going to make this one very long. Um, it appears there's been another spree shooting in the United States, this time in Oregon. The details are just emerging, so all the facts are obviously not very clear at the moment. But the preliminary reports seem to say there's 13 dead, 20 injured. It's taken place at a community college. And the shooter is deceased, 20-year-old white male. Um, I have to say a few things here. Firstly, I'm well aware that I'm an outsider, so this is an outside perspective, but I think it's a perspective that's shared by many, many Americans. Um, I'd be tempted to say they're the silent majority, but I'm aware there's also many, many Americans who have a very different view. Um, I think it's quite obvious that this is simply not something that happens on such a recurrent basis in other developed countries. Um, True, there has been spree shootings in Germany and Finland, and very small number in the UK, some in Canada, but nowhere else do we seem to have the scale that the United States has. I'm talking among developed countries. There will be countries like Honduras and Brazil with much higher crime rates, but A, they're developing countries, and B, um, the, there's also political situations going on in some of those countries. I can't think of any other developed democracy that has this problem on such a recurrent basis. This appears to be the worst this year, but there was a Charleston massacre, the biker shootout in Texas, and that's just this year. I really do feel despair sometimes because I just think it's not necessary that so many innocent Americans are being killed. Now, like I say, the facts still are emerging, but I would not at all be surprised if the guy who done this legally purchased his firearm. I would not be surprised. And to me, that sort of flies in the face of the rhetoric that the gun lobby always come out with about guns being necessary to protect people from gangs. Um, of course, in inner city areas, gangs is a big problem, but most of these spree shootings appear to be young white men, and they appear to be bitter, lone individuals. Um, and to me, this is a toxic mix. When you have a situation whereby guns are easily available, it doesn't matter if this was a gun-free zone, because if this guy legally purchases firearm, the source, that doesn't impact the source, and it would be very easy for him to just go into the school and shoot up people. This is a toxic mix because when you have a situation where there's someone who, and I'm not going to speculate why he's done this, very often it's people who are isolated, they have a victimhood mentality. Um, in the case of the Charleston thing, that was obviously motivated by racism, but very often it's a similar story that they are isolated. They're usually obsessed by guns. There's all of these trends. Um, I do think it's fair to point out that there is an inconsistency with the gun lobby shouting and screaming about gun rights, but then they would be the very first people who would absolutely have an issue with a black guy with a gun because, hey, he must be a thug. And I'm not race baiting here. I think this is a very noticeable thing. Um, there's not much more I can add to this because I've made my views in previous videos pretty clear. Um, I think America's problem with gun violence is primarily because it has such soft gun laws. And I know people will point out things like this was a gun-free zone, or as for the state, I may be wrong about this, but I believe Oregon is one of the states that has very lenient gun laws. If I'm wrong, I accept responsibility for misquoting that, but I believe that Oregon is one of the states that has very lenient gun laws. Um, I also think the issue of gun show loopholes needs to be explored because where you do have high crime in big cities like Chicago and New York, um, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that gangs there get their weapons from gun show loopholes in states where it is very easy to get weapons. Um, I I just can't comprehend this situation. I cannot comprehend, for example, you have a situation where people can go around with loaded firearms, I'm talking about open carry, bring those into coffee shops and past primary schools, and this is baffling to me. It's just utterly baffling. And I know that a lot of people watching this will strongly disagree with me, but I would point out that one of the first act of the Constitution is the First Amendment, I should say, is freedom of expression. It seems to me that the gun lobby, and by this I'm talking about extremists, are very keen to shout about their right to bear arms, but they're also very keen to shout down anyone who disagrees with them. They rant and rave about freedom and liberty, but they don't give a damn about the freedom and liberty, A, to live in safety and security, and B, to have their opinion of those who disagree with them. And they'll even stoop so low as to say that massacres that are well documented are made up. Um, this mentality to me is not only is that deeply insulting to the victims' families, but to me it shows a desperation on their part. I also get frustrated with the blatant lies that are spread around by the likes of the NRA. Um, not only about my country, because they will say things like, "Oh, Britain has very high violent crime rates," and not with guns, we don't. Not at all. I don't know what the American rate of knife crime is. I'd be interested to see that, incidentally. But the fact of the matter is, we do not have a situation like this. And I'm not saying that to be sort of like, "Oh, we're better than you," or something. I'm saying it because I'm frustrated with the number of innocent Americans being killed. And I'm frustrated that every time a politician has the courage to speak out in this, they're denounced as wanting to take away freedom. This is insane. That people who see that there is a problem with this never-ending cycle of violence, because what seems to happen is there's a temporary, like everyone on both sides says, "Oh, it's shocking, it's terrible," and I'm sure the NRA will say it's terrible what will happen. Then the NRA will propose that every child in the neighborhood has an AK-47. That's a warped solution to this problem. It's like fighting fire with fire. It's madness, in my opinion. I just, I'm not on the ground. I don't know all the issues inside out, but I think a lot of this comes down to common sense. And I just think that um, it's it's crazy. I mean, one of the lies, by the way, I mentioned lies spread by the NRA. Obama's been president now for almost 7 years. Now they've been scaremongering the whole time, saying he's going to take away your guns. I have not seen a single example of a responsible, law-abiding citizen having their guns taken away in a private property. Not once. And believe me, there's hundreds of videos online. I haven't seen an example of that once. That's just one example of their lies. Um, but people say that they want freedom from big government and so on, but the NRA is a very powerful organization. They don't seem to care that the NRA has a shacklehold on American freedom. So my heart goes out to all the victims of this tragedy, but it won't be the last time. And it's to me, it's tragic that it's just going to be another example where nothing is done. And I don't blame Obama for that because his power is limited, as it should be. But I just hope one day America will wake up and realize that this is not something that happens in other countries. It's just not.